Who likes small, interesting, and cheap lenses that fit on the L mount? Oh, me! This guy does. So today we're going to be looking at the Brightin Star 28mm f2.8 M mount lens, which has been converted to L mount, hence why it's now sitting nicely on my S9. And I've got a lot of love for this lens, and I'll go through the reasons why in this video. But before I do that, let's talk about the price point, because of course, like I said, it is a cheap lens. It doesn't cost too much money. It costs about £339 here in the UK, or about $330 if you're in the US, but you can find it cheaper online at places like AliExpress and stuff, so definitely do your research before you pull the trigger and get this one. Of course, it's a manual focus only lens, and the really interesting thing about this lens for me personally is that it's made of brass, which is quite a heavy metal comparative to other metals out there, so this little thing is actually quite hefty given its size. Now let me just quickly show you guys how small this thing is. I'll take it out of the adapter now. Don't know, okay, focus, here we are. So this is how small the Brightin Star 28mm is. It is absolutely tiny. This is a manual focus only lens, so if you are scared of manual focusing and rely primarily on autofocus, then this won't be for you. But in order to focus this lens, on the front you'll see it'll be focusing. There's this little, do you see it? There's this little handle just here that you can then use to focus. And then there's like this little knurled ring which you use to change the aperture just here, as you can see in my fantastic demonstration right now. It's not very user friendly, I'd say, at least for the aperture part, but the focus little handle is nice to have. But I would say that in terms of the aperture, changing that on the fly, you're not really going to be doing that. I sort of found myself setting it and forgetting it, so to speak. So if I was in a low light environment, or if I wanted a little bit more subject separation, I set it to f2.8 and forget about it. And then if I wanted to have a little bit more in focus or to let less light in, then I'd put it to like f5.6, and again, just leave it there and go out and shoot. So I would say it's much better to set your aperture with this lens and just go out and shoot with it, and then just change your focus. Now onto the really important part, which is the image quality. And I must say that for the price point, this lens definitely doesn't disappoint. The images have a lot of character, I find the contrast really nice, and it's actually a really sharp lens in the center. I will say that as you sort of deviate and get towards the edges of the frame, you get a little bit of this softness going on, but then again, that could be seen as character. And if you want a clinically sharp lens, then unfortunately you're not going to get that from edge to edge when you spend about $300. I actually found acquiring focus quite easy with this lens, thanks to that little focused handle thing on the focus ring. So the actual usability in that regard was actually very nice. One thing I will say though, and it's been a gripe of mine since I started using Lumix cameras, is that the focus peaking sometimes isn't true to life. And what I mean by that is sometimes when you look at it without punching in, you'll see all the blue peaking or whatever color you have it set to, and you'll be like, oh, okay, cool, I'm in focus. And then you take the photo, you zoom in, and it's really soft. So I did find myself sort of punching into acquire focus just to make sure that I was actually nailing the focus on whatever it is I wanted to focus on. But again, that's not really a flaw of the lens per se. I'd say that's more so a flaw with the peaking on Lumix cameras. And it's something that I've mentioned a few times to people that work for Lumix and stuff. It's an issue that I've had since the OG S5 all the way up to the S9 and also on the S1 and stuff. So I really do hope at some point they do make it a little bit easier so that, you know, things aren't looking like they're in focus on the LCD screen when they're actually not. And of course in life, everything isn't sunshine and rainbows and roses, so there are some downsides to this lens that I have found. One of them being the minimum focus distance. Again, if you're not someone that cares too much about that, then fair enough, but I do care about the minimum focus distance of a lens. I like to get a little bit closer to what I'm shooting sometimes, especially when I'm at 28mm. So the minimum focus of this lens, what does it say it is? It says it is 2.3 feet, so I'll put the equivalent in meters on the screen now. But I just found it was a little bit further away than what I'd like it to be, if I'm being honest. And then my second sort of complaint about this lens, which may just be in my head if I'm being honest, is I noticed there was a little bit of distortion when I was shooting. Again, you know, we are a little bit wide, so there might be a little bit of distortion when you do get close to stuff, but particularly when I was shooting buildings and anything that had sort of straight sides on it, I noticed a tiny bit of bowing. Again, this isn't really a massive issue because programs like Lightroom can correct that really easily, but it's just something to be aware of. When Brightin Star sent me out this lens, they actually sent out the M to L mount adapter along with it, and I'm not too sure whether that's included in the set when you go and buy this lens, but if you were wanting to use this lens with your L mount camera, then just be sure that it includes that adapter. If not, you have to go ahead and buy your own L to M mount adapter, or M to L mount. M to L mount, it's that way around. So yeah, just be aware of that. As you guys can see, the pupil of this lens is actually quite small, which means that you won't be able to attach normal size filters to this lens, meaning that it's essentially not going to be good for video shooting. But I think a lens of this style and design has definitely been made for the photographer, not the videographer. It's definitely more of a sort of rangefinder, analog-esque style of shooting, and I really like that. Brightin Star also provided this little UV filter that screws right onto the front of the lens. So what I did was just screw that on, and that essentially acted like my lens cap when I was out shooting. It did come with a lens cap, but I didn't want to be screwing that on and off the entire time, because the only way to attach it is by screwing it on, not by, you know, pressure pointing it or whatever you want to call pinching it on. So having that UV filter was really useful to make sure I wasn't scratching up the front lens elements. I'm actually really happy with all of the images that I've been able to capture with this lens. I do think the image quality is fantastic for the price point, and they're really sharp, at least sharp enough for me. Again, for the sort of $300 price point, you can't really complain too much, given that the images look nice, punchy, and the color looks nice and saturated as well. So it's definitely a massive tick in the image quality department. So would I recommend this lens to you guys? If I was someone that was looking for a very small and compact lens that also gave me a very rangefinder analog-esque style of shooting photos, then yes, 100%. I must say that I really enjoy shooting with this lens. I mean, I love doing street photography, and it's great for that use case. And the 28mm focal length is actually kind of challenging, but in a nice way. It's inspiring in that regard. All of the photos in this video were taken with my LUMIX S9, by the way, so if you think it looks good and you'd like to know a little bit more about why I love this camera so much, then go ahead and check out this video next.